Hello and welcome to Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. I am so happy to be back. After 2.5 years on YouTube, I finally took a little break to get my podcast started. I've only been gone for 3 weeks, but it feels like forever, right? But I'm back. I'm really excited for 2023. I think this is going to be the year. I've got lots of exciting things lined up, and I'm so happy to take you along with me through the next 12 months. Hopefully you'll stick around for even longer than that. I've got lots of great stories. Some you've heard. I'm going to bring a new take to. Some you haven't heard. And of course, the podcast starts in a couple of weeks. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your support. Thank you for waiting through the break with me. Thank you for being here. And I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. And with that said, here's to 2023. Let's get into our story. Well, obviously things have drastically changed in this case. I'm with my daughter, and we just heard that a suspect has been arrested in the Idaho student murders. I filmed this episode a few days ago before this news came out. I'm going to go ahead and post the episode because what I did was went through all of the facts that we know, and I kind of want to memorialize that on our channel. And then when new information comes in, we can go back and see how much of it was correct, how much of it was incorrect. But yeah, this is it's kind of breaking news, and I will update this as we continue, obviously. But a lot of what I say here today, by the time this posts next week, we might know more. But I'm going to post it anyway, and then we'll review it at a later date. As Thanksgiving 2022 approached, and we all began to prepare for the upcoming holiday season, a terrible story began to unfold in front of us. We sat glued to our televisions and our phones as the details grew more gruesome and more tragic each day. In a sleepy little Idaho college town, 4 beautiful young people with their whole lives ahead of them had been murdered, brutalized, really, in a manner that we usually only see in slasher films. Now 2 months later, we are still waiting to find out who the monster is that took their lives. This is the story of the Idaho student murders. Let's get into it. November 12th, 2022. It was a Saturday night in Moscow, Idaho, home to the main campus of University of Idaho. The campus is surrounded by rolling hills, and the area is a popular place for nature photographers. It's even been featured in National Geographic magazine. There are only 24,000 people who live in Moscow, but Men's Journal named it a hip little city. It's very much a college town, and most of the businesses there revolve around the college. One of the very first stories I ever covered here on Dining with Death was about a murder conspiracy hatched in a Moscow pizza parlor. That episode is called The Pizza Pipeline Murder, and it's a tragic story. So as idyllic and beautiful as Moscow, Idaho is, it is not without its share of crime. This kind of crime, however, on a different level. There is an annual Renaissance fair that occurs at the beginning of spring every year where local artists and craftspeople gather to sell their wares. There are lots of parks and live music venues, and for the size of the town, there is a lot to do in Moscow. I asked you all if you wanted me to cover this story because it has been covered a lot in the last few weeks, and you gave me a 100% response of yes. So in addition to the story, I'm going to cover some things that I don't feel have been touched on enough. A little about each of the victims and what their relationships were with each other. That's been a bit confusing to me as I've listened to the story, and sometimes those interpersonal relationships become very, very important later on. So I would like to know more about the people. I also think it's important that we really know our victims so we can remember them properly. There are around 10,000 students enrolled at University of Idaho each year, and among them were the people we are going to be talking about today. This is Ethan Chapin. Ethan is a triplet. He was born first of the bunch, making him the oldest of the 3. They were born at a Seattle hospital. Here he is with his sister Maisie and his brother Hunter. Absolutely every single thing I read about Ethan Chapin described him as a bright light, a truly wonderful person who was fun to be around, who everyone liked, and who was an incredible friend, brother, son, and person. Ethan's high school experience at Mount Vernon High in Washington State was cut short by COVID. he and his siblings packed up and went to Idaho to work at Hills Resort. His experience in Idaho helped cement his decision to attend college there. As in life, the triplets wanted to do everything together, so Maisie and Hunter also enrolled and were attending Idaho State University at the time of this tragic event. This is Xana Kernodle. She was born in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and grew up in Post Falls, Idaho. She grew up in gymnastics and later on ran track and played soccer in high school. Xana graduated and enrolled at University of Idaho, where she was majoring in marketing. She loved her dog, Shoeshine, and she loved going to concerts and listening to EDM music. She worked here at the Mad Greek restaurant while she was attending school, and by all accounts, she was a wonderful friend, a happy, outgoing person who openly showed others love and who loved her life. Xana had a contagious smile and a great sense of humor, and she was someone that left everyone a little happier than when she found them. This is Madison Mogen. She was born in Oregon, but moved with her family back to their hometown in northern Idaho when she was only 2 years old. Maddie was a determined girl who knew what she wanted, and after graduating high school, set her sights on University of Idaho. Maddie was a fantastic student. She made the dean's list every semester at college. She was also someone who had a fantastic work ethic. She excelled at every job she ever had. She remained friends with everyone she worked with, and she had a mass of friends and family who loved her. She had a quirky sense of humor, and people loved to be around her. She was fun, she was kind, she was excited about the endless possibilities that lay ahead of her. This is Kaylee Goncalves. She was born in Concord, California in 2001. Kaylee was known to be a spitfire. She was a free-spirited individual who loved to have a good time. Her parents describe her as a little bit of a goofball. She had a contagious laugh and, like Madison, was an excellent student. She had a golden doodle named Murphy, who she loved dearly. Kaylee was energetic and determined and strong. Some have even described her as tough. She was a wonderful friend and a devoted daughter and sister. Kaylee had a long-term boyfriend named Jack DeCour, and she loved being a student at University of Idaho. Kaylee was a prankster, and those close to her say that they will really miss those pranks, and they will really miss Kaylee, who they describe as pure love and joy. The relationships. Kaylee and Madison were lifelong best friends. They had known each other pretty much their entire lives, and they were very close. You know those best friends that were always together in school? Those girls where you never saw one without the other one? That was Kaylee and Madison. In fact, I read a tribute written by one of their high school teachers who said their names were just hyphenated. It wasn't Kaylee and it wasn't Madison. It was Kaylee, Madison. They were a duo, joined at the hip. They were gorgeous girls, always smiling, always laughing, and always having a good time. Kaylee, Madison, and Xana were roommates, and they lived here in this house on King Street in Moscow. The three girls were in a sorority together. Kaylee and Madison were very good friends, and Xana was friends with them in the sorority. So that's how that relationship works. Now, as we go through this case today, this unsolved case, it's a very recent event. There are going to be a lot of questions we can't answer today. And there will also be some information that I give out that we will most likely find out in the future is incorrect. This case has been all over the news, all over social media, and it's been a very big topic of conversation online. Whenever that happens, facts get mixed up with opinions, and sometimes it's difficult to tell which is which. The first item of some confusion is just exactly how many people were living in this house at the time of the murders. It is a 6-bedroom house. Some people say there were 5 people living there, and others say there were 6. The consensus right now is that 2 other people were in the house on the night of the murders, and those 2 people were left unharmed. Now, this right here is just red flags all over the place. So let's talk about that for a moment. These 4 young people were stabbed to death. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But my point here is that these were not gunshots to the head. There is not a silencer on a weapon. I don't know if you've ever heard anyone being stabbed. I have, and they scream a lot. 4 people being stabbed to death, there is going to be some noise. So how did the other 2 people in the house not hear anything? For that matter, how did the 3 victims not hear the first being stabbed? Something is very strange about all of this. We have some details on how many times the victims were stabbed. Without getting too graphic, there is really only one explanation as to how one assailant could stab 4 people to death without anyone hearing a thing, and that is, of course, that their throats were slit. I do not know if that is the case. I'm just saying I'm thinking about how it could be possible that 4 people could be stabbed to death in the same house and no one heard a thing. There are other ways to immediately silence someone with a knife, but it's very strange to me that no one heard anything. The 2 surviving people in the house, from everything that I've read, appear to be female. Their names have not been released. I'm sure there are people who know who they are. They were asleep on the 1st floor of the house. The murders took place on the 2nd and the 3rd floors of the house. Now, the 2 survivors, who have not been officially named, did come forward last week and speak to the press anonymously. Both had wonderful things to say about the victims. They talked about how Kaylee and Madison were like sisters to them, and they talked about how wonderful the relationship was between Ethan and Xana. The police have also stated that the 2 survivors are not suspects. They appear to have slept through the attacks, which again, to me, means there was not a lot of noise during those attacks. However, after the murders, a neighbor came forward. His name is Ethan Chapin. He's a 30-year-old man who lives in an off-campus apartment building near the house the murders took place in. Ethan returned home from his job as a cook in a restaurant about 1:30 in the morning, the early morning hours of November 13th. He watched TV and he said he dozed off around 4 a.m. Just after 4 in the morning, he heard a very loud scream coming from the direction of the house. He said to him it sounded like a, quote, party noise. There was often a lot of activity at the house, and it wasn't unheard of for people to be screaming during parties. He said because of that, he didn't think anything about it at the time, but since then, of course, it has haunted him. Now, of course, it begs the question, was that one of the victims screaming? And it also begs the question, if a neighbor down the street heard someone screaming, how did the roommates not hear a scream? The only thing I can say about that is this. I think back to when I was 20 years old, I could sleep through a hurricane. Now, if a fly buzzes into my bedroom, I'm awake for an hour. It's the joys of getting older. But back then, I could sleep through just about anything. Maybe the other roommates just simply didn't wake up. Now, knowing that the murders took place on 2 different floors of the house does explain somewhat how one assailant might have been able to accomplish 4 murders. It isn't like all 4 people were in the same room or even on the same floor. So that does explain how one person could possibly commit these types of attacks more silently, but I still believe there is a good possibility throats were cut due to the lack of screaming. It also takes time to die from a stab wound. I could be totally wrong here, but a stabbing is not an immediate death unless, and even that is not immediate, but it is a lot more rapid and it is more quiet. Let's go over a timeline of the night leading up to the murders. November 12th was a Saturday. In college life, that usually means going out on a Saturday night. Kaylee and Madison were together at the Corner Club, which is a bar in downtown Moscow. They were there from around 10 p.m. to about 1:30 a.m. They left the club and were then seen on surveillance video at 1:40 a.m. standing outside a food truck called Grub Truck. I'm going to play you a clip from the surveillance footage taken at the food truck. The person that owns the food truck actually streams live on Twitch, and so there is footage of the interaction there. This is not the entire video, but pay attention to the man in the white hoodie you'll see in the video. Kaylee and Madison then got a ride home from someone they knew. That person dropped them off at home. I heard talk about it being an Uber driver. The police have said officially it was someone that they knew. They have not named the person. The police have stated that neither the grub truck employee nor the person who gave the girls a ride home are suspects. While Kaylee and Madison were at the Corner Club, Ethan and Xana were at the Sigma Chi house for a house party. The two of them, Ethan and Xana, were seen by quite a few people. There is, however, an issue. We're going to talk about it. So Ethan and Xana get home to the house on King Street about 1:45 a.m. And like I said earlier, Ethan did not live there, but he was spending the night with Xana at her place. The two surviving roommates that slept on the first floor also went out in downtown Moscow on Saturday night, and they were home by about 1 a.m. From the hours of about 2 a.m., no one is sure what happened inside the home. What police believe is that between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., the assailant entered the home and committed the murders. It's also important to note that there was a dog in the house, so lots of questions there. You can't get within 50 feet of the outside of my house without my dogs throwing up the alarm. Whether they know you or not, it doesn't matter. They hear noise outside, they're barking. Not all dogs are like that, though. Maybe this wasn't a barky dog. Or maybe the assailant was already in the house before everyone returned home, and the assailant had made friends with the dog. The dog is an important element to me. Either it wasn't a dog that barked, or it wasn't barking for a reason. This next item is one that I'm very confused about. The police initially told the public that on the morning of Sunday, November 13th, when the surviving roommates awoke, they, quote, called friends over to the house because they thought one of the victims on the second floor had passed out and wasn't waking up. This makes absolutely no sense to me. Again, without getting too graphic, this crime scene was so bloody that the sheetrock of the walls in the bedrooms got soaked through and there was blood leaking out of the house. You can see that here in this photo. Do you know how much blood there has to be for that to occur? That is a lot of blood. How on earth did the roommate believe someone was passed out? We don't have any answers on this yet, and I'm going to take a guess and say it was a police story and that they, maybe being a little bit naive, this is a very small town, not a lot of murder, thought they could put out a story that they thought the people were passed out, and then when it got out how they died, everybody was like, that makes no sense. That is really the only plausible explanation I can come up with, because there was no question these people were not passed out. At 11:58 a.m. on November 13th, the first 911 call was placed from the house to the police. The caller's identity has not been released, but again, they were requesting help from the police for, quote, an unconscious person. So we'll have to wait for more information, but right now I really can't wrap my mind around this. You'd think there would be a call coming in saying there's blood everywhere, they're dead, this type of thing. But unless they're intentionally misleading us or leaving information out, that is not what happened. They're saying the call came in, they said people were passed out. Baffling. Police arrived at the house on King Street, and responding officers immediately found the 4 victims on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the house. Now, for some reason, the 2 surviving roommates, either before or after they called 911, had called other people over to the house. I also find this very strange and very concerning. So we've got the 2 surviving roommates and a handful maybe of people that we don't know who they are. So everyone at the house, the 2 surviving roommates, and the people they had called to the house were questioned, and police have stated that none of those people are considered suspects. After photos of the crime scene were taken and all the investigation that needed to be done at the scene was done, the bodies of the 4 victims were removed. Police then began to go through the house, and for the next several days, we see footage and photos of them removing items from the house as evidence. They took furniture, they took personal items, they took whatever they thought might be of help. Several days after the murders, the victims' cars were towed, which resulted in this eerie scene: 4 empty spots on the ground in the freshly fallen snow. I find this picture heartbreaking and a little eerie and strange. Over the next week, frustration grows as the public and the families alike feel the police are not being transparent in the investigation. Now, this is a very fine line to walk. Of course, there are things that the police can't talk about, that they won't talk about. They have a quadruple murder on their hands. It's all over the national and even international news, and they're trying to solve the crime. They're also dealing with a demanding public that wants details. It's a tough place to be in. On November 28th, Steve Goncalves, Kaylee's father, tells the press that he is sad and feeling a little defeated by the lack of transparency from the police, but that he trusts law enforcement to do their job. Steve also tells the press that the students died quickly and did not bleed for hours. So an earlier 911 call would not have saved their lives. People were making accusations that, somebody should have checked in on them, somebody should have seen them earlier. Her dad is specifically saying, and he knows more than we do, they died very quickly. Again, with the no screaming, that is leading me to think of the throats. Steve Goncalves said, nobody suffered and nobody felt like that kind of pain. So again, very telling. There was a vigil held on Wednesday, November 30th that was every bit as sad and emotional as you would assume it to be. And then things go somewhat quiet for the next few days. Then on Wednesday, December 7th, the police make a big announcement. They tell the public that they want to speak with the driver of a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra that was seen, quote, in the immediate area of the victim's house. They saw this car there in the early morning hours of November 13th. Somebody saw this car there. And there might even be cameras. We don't know yet. A week later, on the 1-month anniversary of the murders, December 13th, the police held a press conference telling the public, quote, the investigation is not cold. We get tips every day that are viable. There is so much that we do not know about this case. Let's go over what we do know for certain. The murder weapon has not been found. Police believe it to be a fixed blade knife, but have given really little information other than that. A detective on the case told the press, quote, the weapon is something the killer paid money for and is something that they're proud of. Now, I found this to be a very interesting statement. Why? Because it tells us that they do, in fact, have some kind of a profile they're working with. They have some type of suspect sketch. They have to in order to make a statement like that. In order to say this is a person who's very proud of their knife, that means they've got a psychological profile that's been done. I read a report dated late November that a detective said they believe the knife is a fixed blade Rambo-style military-grade knife. So I'm picturing one of those really large knives with a very sharp point that has serrations, big serrations on one side, and a smooth blade on the other. That's what a Rambo knife means to me. So again, they do seem to have some information on the weapon, probably from the wounds. Now, the other thing we know is that the police have come out and said they believe this attack was, quote, isolated and targeted, and that they do not believe there is an imminent or ongoing threat to the public. Now, again, this tells me they have a profile, but I take issue with this statement. There is a literal maniac running around loose in Moscow, Idaho, an actual monster who slashed 4 people to death in their beds. Under any definition of danger to the public, that's danger to the public. We all know there are rumors out there of stalkers, people obsessed with these pretty girls, that kind of a thing. But that doesn't mean that person isn't capable of killing someone else. So I have a little bit of an issue with the there's no danger to the public thing. Anyone capable of committing such a horrific crime is capable of doing just about anything. Something else we know, the detectives have stated that they do not know which of the 4 victims was the focus of the attack or if it was an attack on the group as a whole. They also state that it could have been an attack on the residents. So let's touch on that. Perhaps this house is owned by someone who has enemies. Perhaps the house itself is the center of some type of dispute, litigation, perhaps. I don't know if that's the case, but the police made it sound as if that's a possibility. It wouldn't take much at all to find out if the house is embroiled in some sort of legal dispute. So, of course, they know that by now. That would be something they would find out, very early on. Again, they haven't said anything. We do know that initially there were a lot of rumors about a stabbing in Washington state clear back in 1999 and another stabbing in Oregon in 2021 having something to do with this crime. This is where the online rumor mill comes into place and is not helpful. The police have stated unequivocally that there is no connection to those crimes. So we're going to have to take them at their word on that. There were also rumors that Kaylee Goncalves had a stalker. The police have stated that they have looked extensively into this possibility and have pursued hundreds of pieces of information and leads and have found absolutely nothing to verify that anyone was stalking Kaylee. We know that there were rumors about a neighbor named Jeremy Reagan. This guy has really been put through the ringer. We know that Jeremy has told the police, I will give you DNA, I will give you fingerprints, I will give you whatever you need. I didn't do this. But we do know of those rumors. We know, and I find this fascinating, none of the victims were sexually assaulted. This was murder for the sake of murder. This was execution. We also know that some of the victims had defensive wounds on their hands and arms, which is not surprising at all. But again, I'm going to be very curious to find out whether or not they were incapacitated with wounds to the throat that stopped them from screaming, because they were fighting back. If you're fighting back, you're screaming, you're asking for help, you're making noise. Well, we know some of them fought back. Oh, gosh. Oh, like just kids, you know. I've got nieces and nephews this age. Oh my gosh, this is awful. I just had a little mini panic attack. I've got 2 nephews in college. I've got a niece at a very, very prestigious college in a very big city. I've got a niece at a large city in the Southwest. I'm having a panic attack right now. Another thing we know is that the house had 2 separate entrances. The lower level had a door with a keypad, like you punch in a code to get in. And then the second story, you could access it from the back, and there was like a glass sliding door. Now, of course, police believe that a lot of people had the code to get into the ground level, so that's a problem. But they actually believe that the killer got in through the sliding glass door on the second level. Why they believe that, I don't know. Hopefully there's some evidence there. Now, remember the man in the white hoodie from the food truck video? There has been a lot of online speculation about this person. People noted that he's paying particular attention to Kaylee and Madison. I mean, they're beautiful girls. I'm sure they got a lot of attention, but this man never orders any food. He arrives at the food truck about the same time as the girls, and he leaves when they leave. So it's a little weird. But police have located this individual, and he has been questioned. He has not been publicly named, but police have stated they do not believe he is involved in the murders. We do know that there were rumors that Kaylee and Madison had taken an Uber home. I mentioned that earlier. The police insist it was a private party, a friend, that drove the girls home. So there was a lot of speculation as to why there was confusion on this point. Was it an Uber? Was it a friend? Police have verified the driver's identity that took Kaylee and Madison home. It wasn't an Uber. They've also said they don't believe this person has anything to do with the killings. So a lot of rumors have been cleared up, but you know how rumors are. We do know that Kaylee and Madison made 10 phone calls to Kaylee's ex-boyfriend right before they were killed. Kaylee calls this ex-boyfriend of hers 6 times between 2:26 a.m. and 2:44 a.m. He never picks up. Then Madison calls him 3 times between 2:44 a.m. and 2:52 a.m. Kaylee then makes the 10th call, the final call, at 2:52 a.m. This ex-boyfriend never answers the phone. So this is an obvious situation. The girls had been out having a few drinks. They obviously had something they wanted to say to this ex. You know, they're best friends. They've obviously been talking about this ex-boyfriend. Maybe they've got something to say to him. But here's the thing. Kaylee and this ex-boyfriend were on good terms. They weren't calling to cuss him out or yell at him. At least people don't believe that. Kaylee's parents, Steve and Christy Goncalves, have told the press, anyone who believes Kaylee's ex-boyfriend is involved is wasting their time. So we really have to listen to the families and really respect what they say during these situations. We don't know what's going on. They do. Her parents said they stand behind this ex-boyfriend. There was no animosity after the breakup, and that they were, in fact, talking about maybe getting back together. The police have also stated they do not believe the ex-boyfriend is a suspect. We do know that Kaylee's dog, a golden doodle named Murphy, is alive and well. We don't have all the details of why the dog didn't bark. We will probably hear more about that later, but the dog is okay. Those are a lot of the things we know, not all of them, but a lot. There are so many things we don't know that I can't list them all. But we do need to talk about the time gap surrounding Ethan and Xana. Remember earlier I said there was an issue. They went to the frat house and then, there's an issue there. So Ethan and Xana got to the frat party around 8 or 9 o'clock. They didn't get back to the house until 1:45 a.m. The issue is that people say they left that frat party around 9 o'clock. They either weren't there for very long or they were only there for an hour. Now, does that mean they were 100% not in the house? It doesn't have to. I mean, frat parties, people go off in bedrooms and things like that, but people are pretty sure they did not see them a little after 9 o'clock. That was the last time. So there is a 5-hour gap of time where no one is sure where Ethan and Xana were. This is huge. What happened in that time frame? Was there an altercation? Did somebody look at Kaylee, and she's a beautiful girl, and follow her home, even though she had a boy with her? It opens up a whole world of what happened. The fraternity house and the house where the murders took place are walking distance apart, only a couple of minutes. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Xana's mother said she believes that Ethan and Xana went to a bar after they were seen at the frat house party, but then she confirmed that she doesn't know for sure that's the case. If they were at a bar, there should be receipts on the debit cards, right? There should be some sort of tracking to let us know where they were. I'm sure the police have some information, but as of right now, we don't know where Ethan and Xana were from about 9 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. when they returned to the house on King Street. Let's talk a little bit about this glove that's been all over the rumor mills. In late November, a couple of weeks after the murders, a single black glove was spotted outside the murder house in the yard. It was found by a man named Chris McDonough, who is a retired homicide detective and host of the podcast, The Interview Room. Chris McDonough was at the crime scene and he pointed the glove out to an officer and said apparently the officer hadn't noticed it. After Chris showed police the glove, they came and took photos of it and then they collected it, placing it in an evidence bag. There are people on Reddit who claim you can actually see this glove before it was discovered, laying in the snow from some drone footage taken right after the murders, even as the police were going in and out. Others claim the thing in the video is not that glove, but there's a lot of talk about that online. It's a bit unsettling to know that a piece of potential evidence may have been missed, but we don't know that that's the case. This glove could turn out to be nothing. It could also turn out to be a very important clue. A few days ago, the internet blew up when a white Hyundai Elantra was found in Oregon and it garnered a bunch of police attention. Everyone assumed this was the white car that the police said they were looking for. The day before I began researching and writing this episode, the police came out to the public and stated that the car has nothing to do with the Idaho murders. They stated it is not the same car in the footage they have, and that there is no link between that car and the car they believe could be tied to the case. Let's talk about the skinned dog. Yes, you heard that right, unfortunately. A few days after the murders, residents living near the murder house, a couple named Pam and Jim Colbert, reported that their dog had been killed and skinned 1 month before the murders happened. They filed a police report, and in that report it states their 12-year-old dog Buddy looked like, quote, a deer that someone had hunted. They filleted him like they were about to eat him. Oh, that's just disturbing beyond belief. Now, again, the police have come out and stated that the skinned dog has nothing to do with the murders. How could they make that statement? They don't know who the killer is. So there is no possible way to know that the person who killed the kids did not skin the dog. It's impossible. I don't understand why police make statements like that. It's strange. Listen, these police are under an unimaginable amount of pressure. I get that. This is a small town police force that's dealing with one of the most publicized murders of the last decade. I'm just saying I don't think it helps to make statements that can't be backed up with facts. There is no possible way of knowing that this skinned dog has nothing to do with the murders, so why say that? Honestly, why make those statements? It just makes the public lose a little trust in the police. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that there is no way of knowing that the two things are not connected. So I just wish a little more thought went into these kinds of statements on these kinds of cases before they were made. It would make things easier for the police as well, because later on, sometimes they have to clear those things up. Now, let's talk opinions and theories. The police believe the killer entered on the second floor of the house, like I said, through the sliding glass door, but they haven't said when they believe the killer entered the house. It was a usual occurrence for the occupants of the home to go out on the weekends and stay out very late. The police have stated they believe this was a targeted attack. If that's the case, it's not far-fetched to assume that the killer had been watching not only the house, but the comings and goings at the house. It would have been very easy for someone to enter the house while everyone was out, for that killer to make friends with the dog if they didn't already know the dog. We'll talk about that in just a second, and simply wait for everyone to come home and fall asleep. It's a terrifying thought, an image to visualize. Some madman with a Rambo-style knife hiding in a closet somewhere, waiting for these kids to fall asleep. It's horrifying. Perhaps the dog didn't bark because the dog knew the person who committed the killings. Moscow, Idaho is a very small town. The college kids run in very small circles. I wouldn't say everyone knows everyone, but I would say on such a small campus, a lot of people know each other and also know the groups that people run in, right? Even if it wasn't someone acquainted with the victims, it wouldn't be difficult at all to learn the victims' habits, their comings and goings. Like I've said earlier, all the girls were beautiful. I'm sure they attracted a lot of attention wherever they went. Ethan was a great-looking guy. Was somebody jealous? Was somebody in love with him secretly? I mean, we just don't know. And poor Ethan, he didn't even live there. You know, sometimes being young and beautiful attracts the wrong kind of attention. Maybe someone was jealous of them. Maybe someone wanted to be with them and they didn't want to be with that person. Anyone watching this house would know that Ethan would not normally be there. On the City of Moscow, Idaho's website, police have put up a page with nothing but links to daily articles coming out of the press. You can go and click on the links that are in chronological order and find out what has been released pretty much daily since the murders. I'll put a link to that page in the description of this video. One of the latest articles said the police have received almost 8,000 emails regarding the murders, 5,000 phone tips, and over 5,000 social media tips. And that is just an overwhelming number of tips with information that has to be investigated. On top of that, the police stated they have conducted over 250 interviews. Police in some of these articles talk about social media posts, most of which are still up, that were made by the victims, and the fact that they have investigated all leads surrounding those posts, including some rumors about someone named Adam that kept popping up. They've confirmed they've identified Adam, and he is not a suspect. The last article I read before recording was December 22nd. There are currently working on this case 6 detectives, 5 support staff based in Moscow, along with a communications team and 60 FBI agents, along with 2 behavioral analysis unit investigators. So that's 2 profilers working on the case. The Idaho State Police has assigned 13 investigators to the case, as well as 15 uniformed troopers and a forensics unit. The case is being worked. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, of course, there are a lot of rumors online that I haven't discussed today, but I've tried to present you with the facts, including facts about the major rumors that are out there. For now, we wait. We wait and we watch, and we hope that the investigators catch every little detail and clue, and we hope that those clues lead them to the killer. And on behalf of my community here at Dining with Death, I want to send our love to the families of Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. What you are going through is every single parent's worst nightmare. You are going through something that no one should ever have to deal with. Please know that you have our support and our best wishes for healing, for a swift outcome, and for justice. We want and we need justice for Kaylee, for Madison, for Xana, and for Ethan, and we will all be hoping for that until this case is closed. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. Hit the like button if you liked the video. Please keep your comments respectful. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to support me. And of course, you can also join my Patreon. Stay safe, my friends, and take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.